the way I understood our role here is to sort of talk about the things we didn't put in the article. And when I got all of us who are authors in this book, we got this email saying that we have to remove our pictures. And I go, what? Alex, we can have pictures? I felt cheated somehow, so I put a lot of pictures in this presentation. So I'll go over that briefly. I'm going to talk about the actual theoretical and the sort of background issues of the article. Then I'm going to briefly go over the history hike as an experience, and then come back to the questions that I talked about at the outset and see how we can deal with them and whether I've dealt with them successfully. I mean, the first topic is Thanatourism. Thanatourism is a concept that I was actually unaware of until I wrote this article. And I have to thank Alex for actually bludgeoning me into writing the article, because I had never expected this to be a theoretical article of an academic quality, but more of a teaching experience for my students. So I've done a lot of history hikes in Austria and in Switzerland, participated and helped organize them, mainly dealing with the period of the Third Reich, primarily on Austrian resistance against Nazi occupation, but also partially with the Holocaust. So I was doing Thanatourism long before I actually knew it's called Thanatourism. So when I started writing the article, I wrote a friend who it turns out to be a mutual friend with Nancy, we talked about that at breakfast yesterday, Albert Lichtblau in the University of Salzburg, and said, you know, we were doing this now, what's it called? Is there a theory behind this? And he said, oh, Thanatourism. And so I Googled it, found the Wikipedia entry, and took it from there. Basically, Thanatourism or grief tourism is doing hikes, doing excursions, dealing with traumatic past experiences, which can, of course, be very, very varied. In Austria, it's often going to concentration camps, dealing with the Austrian Civil War of 1934, and other issues. I also helped organize a hike from Austria, from the American zone of Austria and Salzburg into Italy, where the Jews who were unable to leave Austria because the British had blocked their entry into Palestine, how they illegally crossed, I can say that here, I can't say that in Beirut, how they were illegally hiking from the American zone of Austria into Italy and then on to Palestine illegally. I also worked with a Swiss organization dealing with the Swiss resistance and how they helped bring Jews and leftists and liberals from Austria and Germany illegally into Switzerland, because in World War II, first of all, you had to escape from Germany or from the Third Reich, and then you had to clandestinely get into Switzerland. Very few people know that the J stamp in the German passports was actually a Swiss idea. It wasn't the Germans who did it, but the Swiss wanted to know which Swiss who were entering Switzerland were actually Jews and which were non-Jewish. Because I mean, if you got in your Mercedes and drove into Switzerland as a tourist, they were used to welcoming you, and that's how a lot of the Jews were initially escaping into Switzerland. So they put a J stamp, and there was all kinds of hikes in this direction. So the concept of Thanatourism. The second issue that I want to deal with is the issue of dialogue. Naively, and I'll go into this briefly, naively we thought that we could set up dialogue sessions between my students at Notre University, which is a Catholic Maronite university, with their own counterparts who are Turkish. There are a significant number of Turkish students in Lebanon, and so we thought that would be an interesting experience, and get some Germans. Germans are always used to dealing with their past, and so they would be sort of a third party, and Germany had already officially apologized for their role in, I don't think they didn't call it a genocide, but in the Armenian issue, their role in it. So it would have been an interesting experience. Of course, what we realized very quickly was that there was very little willingness on the part of the Armenians in Lebanon, not so much the students, but my colleagues who were my age, to dialogue with Turkish counterparts as long as they did not recognize the genocide. So we dropped that and worked on a concept called truth-telling, which is often the first step, where the survivors tell their own story, which was very important, as I brought up yesterday. A lot of the students who are in their late teens and 20s, they really don't know their own story. They haven't heard it, as we saw in the documentary on the first night. They haven't heard this from their grandparents and great-grandparents. So that was the actual trajectory of the project. And the third one was to use art, and that's sort of where I come in, because I have a PhD in political science, but I also have a master's degree in German literature, and so one of my emphases is Orientalist literature, and Franz Werfel's novel, The 40 Days of Musa Dagh, is many things, but it's also an Orientalist novel. So I was familiar with it from that perspective, him as an Orientalist, along with many others in the 20s and 30s. So we tried to link the three: Thanatourism, truth-telling, and the role of art in dealing with traumatic past experiences. And then bringing my own background, which was in the whole issue of the dealing with the past, and what we call in German Vergangenheitsbewältigung, or dealing and overcoming the past in a Central European context, to the situation in the Middle East. As a way of introduction as well, because some people are wondering why an Odar like myself would deal with the genocide. I didn't know that word. I found it out here, right? I said, you got to have a word for goy, right? and no one in Lebanon would tell me, but you did, right? Yeah. So what's an Odar like myself doing, dealing with the genocide? And mainly because I had a very close friend from Iran, from Tehran, an Armenian. And the Armenians from Iran deal with the genocide much differently than they do if they're from the diaspora, if they're actually direct victims of the genocide. So I had the experience of Austria. I had the experience of a good friend from Iran whose storytelling of that period was very much different than I then experienced in Lebanon. So the triangulation of the three. So now I'm going to go on to the presentation. So yeah, so that's the mountain. That's Musa Dagh. It's beautiful. We go there at the end of April or the beginning of May of each year, and actually hike up the mountain. So it is in that sense really a history hike. This is, by the way, the second English edition. The first English edition of the novel came out in the 30s, and it was shortened by about 25%, and some of the more problematic terms and scenes were taken out because the Book of the Month Club in the U.S., who published it in the 30s, wanted to make it palatable for an American audience, shorten it and make it less sexy, if you will. And that edition is the full-length German original with all of the menage a trois and everything in there in minute detail, which didn't happen, by the way. So the background of this is a conflict transformation project. We're very far away from that, actually. We're hopefully transitioning now from the truth-telling phase of the project, which I go into in a lot of detail in the article, to dialogue. And that's one of the things that the young participants, after going there once or twice, have said, that now we're ready to actually talk to our counterparts on the Turkish side. I mean, they dealt a lot indirectly with Turks, because if you go to Musa Dagh, to Samandagh, there's Turks all over the place, so you can't avoid it, right? So a lot of them in the first year had gone there claiming they're not going to talk to Turks, they're not even going to eat Turkish food, they're not going to give any money to the Turkish economy, and that proved to be an illusion. And now, actually, we're transitioning now into a willingness on the part of the participants. So another thing that I had to do for the article that I wasn't planning was a survey of the participants. So there's actually now, in the article, there's a survey basically using quantitative survey methods of how the participants experienced this over 2 years. This is the first time that we actually did something in public. This is actually one of the participants who had the idea back in 2010 to do this. Her name is Reya Dacher, and she's half Armenian. Her mother's an archaeologist. In 2011, she told me that she had been to Turkey with her mother and some of her friends who were archaeologists, and she had discovered that she's Armenian. She knew that her mother was Armenian, but she didn't know what that meant. And going to the village where they were from and seeing her mother's response to this actually awakened the Armenianness in her, and she had this idea that we should do something along these lines. The other one was a student, Tashnak Scout, student of mine, who every time I go to Turkey, she'd attack me on Facebook, although she was taking courses with me, that I'm so Turcophile and what's wrong with me. And so the two of them were actually, you know, on opposite sides of the spectrum, but they were the two that sort of gave the impetus for the project in 2010, 2011. And by 2013, this is her actually at a conference on conflict transformation where she's describing how she discovered that she was Armenian. We set it up with two universities. Initiatives of Education is the educational branch of Initiatives of Change, which is a conflict transformation organization based in Switzerland, and Co, which is near Geneva and Montreux, up the mountain there. Notre Dame University, my university, which is Catholic, Maronite, and Haigazian, which is a Protestant Armenian university, both in the Beirut area. So we set this up. We after the first hike, we got an award from the town of Anjar, from the historical commission of the town of Anjar, which was good for me too, because then my ODAR status was sort of relativized. I got the plaque now, so now I can speak with some authority after that recognition. So this is the hero of the actual historical hero, who, I don't know if I should ruin the ending of the novel for you, if you're planning on reading it, but the ending of the novel and the real history of Kolustian is quite different. The novel is, I would say, about 80 to 90% real, but there's some significant differences. And so we deal with the two stories, the actual story. And here you can see where this is a monument in Anjar. The actual story, Kolustian actually ends up being one of the longest serving MPs in Beirut Parliament. So that's obviously different than the end of the novel, if you know the end of the novel. And Baghradian is very heroic, it's a very romanticized story. It's 1,000 pages. That was typical for the 20s and the 30s, where people often spent their evenings reading instead of going online and doing whatever. This is the area where the battle took place. What actually happens in reality and in the novel is they're forewarned by the deportations in Zaytun. And this is true. The people from Zaytun who were from Musa Dagh, they are able to flee the columns. They go back to Musa Dagh, to the villages there, and tell them what's going on. And they see it because they see the condition that people are in, and they are prepared then when it's their turn to be led away to their death. They go up the mountain. And the Turks, of course, the Ottoman army doesn't expect anybody to do that, because if you go up that mountain, you're not going to come back down. And so why would you flee up a mountain? And they were able then to hold off the Ottoman onslaught for over 50 days. But this being Mount Moses, the 56 days of Musa Dagh doesn't work. So 40 days of Musa Dagh, that's a much better title for the novel. And this is Franz Werfel. Franz Werfel is a Viennese, actually a Prague German Jew. So he has that broken sort of history himself. The actual title of the novel is 40 Days of Musa Dagh, A Warning for Humanity, which most people don't know. It's in the German original. And he wrote this after having been in Aleppo and seeing Armenian orphans working in the carpet shops. He found out why they were there. He researches it. He finishes at the end of 1932. He goes on a book tour right before Hitler comes to power. It's actually published then after Hitler comes to power. He's in Austria, so he can live there in peace until 1938, when he's forced to flee to Los Angeles, where he dies very shortly after that. So we deal with two actual characters, an author who has an interesting history as an Austrian Jew, and Kolustian, the novel. Here we see, this is nothing new to anybody, but just to show you that Musa Dagh, the mountain near Antakya, is on the edge of the core Armenian settlement areas, and right north of that is Zaytun. And the history is a little bit interesting because they resist in 15. They're starving to death. They're brought back. First of all, they're saved by a French frigate, but they're brought back in 1920 because this is part of Syria, which is now Hatay. This part of which was actually then given by the French mandate to the Turks in 39. So between 1920 and 39, the people of Musa Dagh actually returned to Musa Dagh. And only in 39 do they then actually leave a second time. So it's a very interesting exception in the history of the genocide as well. And in 39, of the 6 villages, 5 are then settled in the French. Syria was a French mandate. Lebanon was a French mandate, and they're then settled in a relatively remote, isolated town of Anjar, which is very close to the Syrian border in the Bekaa Valley. Here's a picture of the refugee camp. It's really interesting in itself because it's classical French social housing. So if you look at if you've been there, it's amazing. I mean, it's just, if you're interested in social housing projects in the 20s and 30s, it's worth seeing it just for that. It's a very interesting town in itself. This is the initiatives of change, initiatives of education. This is a picture from the late 40s. What initiatives of change was very successful in some of the transitions, which, for example, the Danish, German, the German-French reconciliation. There was some success in Cyprus, some success in Lebanon. We tried to do something similar, but basically because there was no real readiness on the part of the Armenian population in Lebanon, we dropped it. So we went back to truth-telling, which is always an option. Now, this is my ODAR credentials side. I mean, Zadok Avakian, a very close friend who introduced me to my future Lebanese wife, who's now dead. He died, unfortunately, of a heart attack. He said, look, Eugene, we're in Vienna. Werfel was a Viennese. He wrote this novel. Read it. And I said, it's 1,000 pages. I'm not going to read that novel. You're always getting on my nerves with the genocide. Come on, give me a break. But then when he died, of course, I felt that I owed it to him. So my little Zadok Avakian corner in my apartment. And I felt bad when I saw the pipe this morning. I thought that's... this is actually the pipe that he smoked. His widow gave it to me. And I basically did it for him. So that's a little bit of the background on a personal level. What we did then, we went to the historical committee in Anjar in April of 2013 when we were ready to start the project, because we wanted to do this actually as an oral history project. That's maybe the fourth aspect of the project. I was very active in what, if anybody's familiar with social history, Sven Lindqvist, called Dig Where You Stand, where you have people study their own history. Back in the 80s, we called it the Barefoot Historian Movement, where you'd go out in the villages and people would you train people to study their own history. This has not succeeded so far, but we're not giving up yet. So we went to the Yesaya Havatian, and they were very, very excited about this. This was 2 years ago, to have some people from a university work on this. So they were responsible then for helping to set us up in Samandak, which is the town at the foot of Musa Dagh. They're from Musa Dagh, so they had the contacts. We stayed at an Armenian pension, friends, so there's a lot of contact coming and going between Samandak and Anjar. This is just some of... We really did as good of a desk research as we could. All the movies, all the literature we could find. One of the problems is with that's Yesaya with the flag, the actual flag that they put on the mountain where the French frigate saw them. One of the big problems with Lebanese students is they don't read. So the attempt to... I mean, I'm not saying they don't read a lot. I'm saying they don't read at all. Zero. Believe me, zero. Right, Avo? Zero. Well, you're an exception. Zero. They actually go through 3.5 years of university without even reading a page. And I'm not joking. They have there's one girl who takes notes, and that's then enough for the... Anyway, so linking art to Thanatourism when the art is a novel has basically also been one of our problems. So what we're going to be planning this year is to actually have sessions where somebody reads the novel out loud. Some of the core Yeah, if you can't beat them, join them, right? Because it's a really exciting story. And this was the first hike. This was our Orthodox Easter. As you know, there's a Western Christian and the Eastern Christian Easter, and they're always different. So we went up to Musa Dagh. It's an amazing hike, so you're all welcome to come, but it's booked out for this year. Next year, we'll be doing it every year, inshallah. This is the first year. What we did the first year is it was Easter, so we made an Armenian cross, and this was the idea of the chaplain at Hague, who came along and helped organize this. And we put 56 candles from the Vakif, which is the only Armenian town left in Musa Dagh, from the church, which has been renovated with Turkish government financing, because the Turkish government is very proud of the fact that they have an intact Armenian village on Musa Dagh, and so that's sort of a way of proving that we're not really that bad. And so there's a lot of government. I have 5 minutes. Okay. This is we had the first year we had 4 students from Anjar who were along, and it was a very moving ceremony. For everybody, it was for the first time, including myself. So we were all very, very emotional about this. Just let me. This cross, we left it there, and we wondered the next year if it was going to be there when we came back. What we did the second year is we don't know where the meeting was held in reality, where the decision was made not to go along on the transports, but to go up the mountain. But if you read the novel, and the novel's not historical in that sense, but if you read the novel, this is a church in the side of a mountain. The top has been removed, and a mosque has been built on top of it. So we said, let's imagine this church, built in 1901, was the place where they made the decision to go up the mountain. So we had a little ceremony. The second year, we also had some Muslims along, as we will this year. And so we had sort of a ceremony. We read a section of the novel where it describes the decision not to be led to the slaughter, but to resist. Vakif is the one intact Armenian town. We got permission through the Anjar connection to do some of the training. So we did training on conflict transformation. We did training on the literature. This is in the pension in Samandak, where I was lecturing on Werfel. And what happened in 2014, in 2013 this was not the case, but in 2014, this was right after Kesab had been taken. And most of the people from Kesab, which is an Armenian village in Syria along the coast, most of the people fled, but those who were too old to flee, they were left behind. And the Free Syrian Army rounded them up, turned them over to the Turkish government, and they were taken to Kesab and paraded in front of the Vakif, and paraded in front of the media to show how Armenian-friendly the Turkish government is. And so when we got there was almost 100 old people in Vakif from Kesab, which was an interesting experience in itself. This is the hike now. It's just, they put us on a truck at 4:30 in the morning. This is actually an Armenian who works for the UN who he was one of the hikers. He had a lot of experiences himself when he did a documentary. He was explaining what it means when you discover your Armenianness and then try to portray it in a documentary. He was in his late 30s. We had somebody from the UK who was doing a documentary. This is at the top. What happened and when the Armenians came back in the in the early 30s, they built this stone structure that looks like a ship to replicate the French frigate which had saved them. In the 50s, the Turkish government blew it up, but they didn't do a very good job, so it's still there somehow, and so we went there, and of course the cross was gone. The cross we had put there the year before was gone. So we're doing some oral history interviews with people talking about how it feels. Hagop was along for the second time, as was Bej, talking about what it's like to experience the hike and your Armenianness, and this is going into a documentary. Every year we have a meal at the top. There was water there. So there was water there 12 months out of the year. That's why they could survive so long there. Pictures. And what we did we replicated, you saw the flag. So what we did is everybody got a piece of white cloth and they wrote something on it, and we made a replication of the white cloth that was hung on the mountain so the French could save them. And then we had, that was Pastor Reverend Schupp from Hagazian. It was his idea. And then we had a ceremony. And then we folded it up and we hid it under a stone. So, so maybe this year it'll still be there. The cross is gone, but the flag might still be there for when we go back. And we're almost done, right? Okay. And wait, this is the French frigate which saved them. There were 6,000 people who actually survived, and so we went down to the coast where they were actually picked up, and one of our trainers from Initiatives of Change, it was her idea. She's like Australian. She said, "Take 2 stones." And we had a little discussion about what this all had meant, and she said, now throw one of them, put in your pocket and take it home, which caused a lot of problems when we went through the scanners at the airport, and throw the other one in the ocean. And this is the last part of we're almost done now. In July after that, we went by ferry from Tripoli, because you can't drive through Syria anymore, to Mersin, and we drove up to Zaytun, where the whole thing starts. And this is the modern name, Suleymaniya is the modern name of Zaytun. And we visited it, and we'll be going, that's where the trip's going to start this year. And for 2019, we're planning a GIS virtual museum. And this is just a video I took of Zaytun. It's now a totally Turkish village, obviously, but it gives you a sort of a feeling of what it's like to be in those mountains. You can see how difficult it was to take. Zaytun had been a town famous for its resistance for several centuries. That was my daughter. So